Marcos was a second-year university student living in a huge city. He was an ordinary young man, with dreams, ambitions, and clear plans for the future. It was true that money was always in short supply, and working at a large grocery warehouse, where he got a job on weekends, did not bring him much income. His friends, who were also students, joked about his poverty, but Marcos himself was never discouraged. Marcos was born into a family where poverty was not just a financial condition, but part of their daily life. His memories of his childhood were often full of small joys that might seem insignificant to others, but to him they were priceless. He remembered how in the morning, even when there wasn't much food in the house, his mother always found a way to feed him and his father, even if it was the same potatoes for dinner as the night before. Marcos's father was a disabled man who had been injured in an accident a few years ago. He was a strong and healthy man before his life was turned upside down. The accident left him confined to a wheelchair, and since that time he has been unable to work. He stayed at home, often without going outside, and sat at the window for hours, looking out at passing cars. It was an ordeal for the whole family. But despite his physical limitations, his father was always by his son's side, supporting him morally, teaching him how to be strong in difficult moments. He helped with household chores as much as possible and always tried to be a support for Marcos and his wife. Marcos's mother was a woman who, despite all the hardships, always tried to keep the family warm and comfortable. During the day she worked as a clerk at the corner store on their street, and at night, when all the neighbors had gone to bed, she took night shifts at the local laundromat. Marcos remembered how often she was out at night, and how she returned tired but always with a smile. Although their life was far from easy, she never let the house look neglected. The small dwelling was always clean, and the smell of fresh sheets, neatly washed in the laundry room, made it cozy and warm. They had no surplus food, and Marcos grew up with the feeling that every meal was a small miracle. Sometimes the meals were monotonous: potatoes, bread, and a few vegetables, sometimes a soup based on simple ingredients. But Mother knew how to cook in such a way that even such dishes seemed delicious. At school, Marcos always brought a small lunch with him in a brightly colored cloth bag. It was his little cozy ritual, and he was proud that he always had a delicious-smelling lunch, even though not everyone in his class had something like that. His mother always made sure his clothes were ironed and fresh, even if money was tight. She made it her goal to make sure Marcos never felt poor or deprived. And despite her difficulties, she always found time to support her son and make him feel important and loved. They ate together, and Marcos remembered how his father always tried to talk to him despite his disability, making every meal a moment of fellowship, even if the meal was the same every day. His father didn't complain about his fate. He taught his son important things, like how to be grateful for what he had and how to respect the labor of others. Marcos understood that everything they had was the result of his parents' constant work and care, and despite all the difficulties, the family was always united. Marcos grew up with the confidence that even in the toughest situations, you can find light. He learned not to be afraid of hardship and to appreciate the simplest things that he thought most people overlooked. His parents became for him a symbol that real strength is not in money, but in the ability to live with honor and dignity, despite any life circumstances. He was also used to hardship, but he was always lucky in life, almost always. One day Marcos went to his favorite cafe to meet his friends, but to his surprise, The cafe was almost empty. In the corner sat a woman, clearly older than him, with seductively dark eyes and a piercing gaze. She was elegantly dressed, as always, but her presence in this small establishment, outwardly cozy but not too luxurious, seemed out of place. Marcos noticed her at once. Passing her table, he took a step back, smiled, and asked if he could sit down. The woman gave him a slightly surprised look, but apparently there was no reason to refuse, and she nodded. She introduced herself, Maria, and the conversation soon began. Marcos noticed that Maria was not like other women her age. She wasn't just aging, it was as if she had gathered all the best that life had to offer: intelligence, charm, allure. In conversation she was sincere, but with a wonderful combination of lightness and depth. She was from a different social milieu, an elderly lady, known in the city for her wealth. Her age would have intimidated many, but not Marcos. Her sparse but penetrating eyes looked at him in some special way. Despite her 70s, Maria was elegant, with excellent taste and an unyielding, confident gait. She was known for her generosity and often organized charitable events. Maria talked about herself, starting with how she grew up in a small town where all she knew was poverty and labor. Her father was a blacksmith and her mother was a teacher at the local school. When she was a teenager, she realized that she wanted to break out of that circle, to not be dependent on circumstances. After school, she went to the capital and enrolled in law school. Student life was enough to realize how much she lacked practical experience. She got a job at one of the largest companies in the city and started building her career there. However, she didn't become rich simply because she was lucky. Luck is only 10% of success, she said. The rest is hard work, resilience, and the ability to see opportunities where others see obstacles. She recounted how once, early in her career, she was sent on a business trip to negotiate with major partners and naively thought they would decide everything for her. Once at one of the prestigious restaurants, she met with businessmen who were sitting at a long table, waiting for her and rather nonchalant. They talked about the deal, but none of it impressed her. Maria smiled, but said that if they weren't ready for a serious conversation, she would just leave. The businessmen laughed, thinking her naive, but as she left her business card and promised them that their names would be in the news if they didn't want to hear her point of view. A week later, she returned to this restaurant and met the same men. "We've been expecting you," one of them said with a smile. They admitted that they had underestimated her. Maria insisted on her position and secured an important deal that eventually brought her her first big income. Maria described how each year, as she overcame challenges, she learned more and more about working with people and understanding their desires. Her persistence led to success and she founded her own company, which eventually became one of the leading companies in its field. It was her love of work and passion for her business that took her to a level she never dreamed of when she was young and without money. But not all her stories were so serious. Once, already successful, Maria decided to show her independence and set off into the mountains with a group of friends. At some point they got lost, and it turned out that the map she had brought was completely out of date. Once on the slope, they started laughing about the situation, but the laughter quickly changed to despair as it started to get dark. Maria, however, did not lose her optimism. She figured out a way to keep everyone calm. She announced that she would read aloud to them her favorite chapters from classic novels until they found a way out. She spoke loudly, as if she really knew where to go, and her confidence infected everyone. Soon someone in their group spotted a fire in the distance, and after a few hours of wandering, they came to a trail. When they got home, everyone joked that Maria wasn't just a businesswoman, she was also an emergency rescuer. Maria laughed remembering this. She had always been sure that difficulties were just a chance to prove herself, and laughter was the best way to overcome any fear. Marcos listened to her story, wondering how a woman of her age, with so much life experience, could be so lively, energetic, and open. Not only did she run her business with an iron hand, but she remained a young soul, able to laugh at herself despite all the success and wealth she possessed. Marcos was fascinated not only by her intelligence, but also by her free outlook on life. Maria, in turn, saw something in him that she hadn't seen in people his age for a long time, not a fixation on material things or the pursuit of her own interests. It was like a breath of fresh air to her. As time went on, Marcos began to see Maria more and more often. And it wasn't just friendship. He saw her not only as a successful woman, but also as an incredible teacher who could teach him about life, business, and much more. Every meeting they spent discussing something new. Maria told him about how to build a business from scratch, about the importance of marketing, about the subtleties of human relationships, and about how this world really works, which so many people believe in without understanding its true nature. Maria spoke about business with such ease and confidence that it seemed to Marcos that it had always been obvious. She explained how important it was to feel the market, how important relationships with people were, how important it was to understand not only money, but also the soul of the business, its depth. For her, money was not the goal. It was a consequence of faith in her work, in what she was doing. For her, everything she did was a service to something more than just making money. They often sat in cafes, where it was quiet and cozy, and talked about life. Marcos listened to Maria's reflections with admiration. She told him how this world was just a moment in the vastness of eternity. She was saying that each person is just a traveler going through this world, and everything we do is only important if we don't get attached to it, if we don't get stuck in this moment, but keep moving. There is always a star ahead, Marcos, she used to say. You don't have to look for it in the past or in the present. It will always be pointing somewhere in the future. It is your goal, your movement, your light. Mary also shared that there will always be a support in you called God. She explained that for her, believing in God was not a formality or following some rules. For her, God was a force that was present in every moment of life, and if you learn to believe, if you allow yourself to be open to that force, you will understand a world that seems so confusing and difficult. That was her philosophy, her life. She said that her success, her ability to be in tune with the world, was the result of that faith, the result of not trying to control everything that happened. She just let it be, and all you had to do was trust it. Marcos couldn't understand how it worked at first. He was used to the idea that money was the result of effort, work, perseverance. But Maria explained to him that she had never held on to money. She loved the world, loved the people, loved the process itself. She was open and free, and it was that freedom that led her to wealth. When you stop being afraid of losing something, you start to gain more than you can imagine, she said. If you value moments without being attached to the outcome, the world will open its doors to you. Marcos, realizing more and more each time how important this inner freedom was, understood that Maria was not just talking about business, but about life in general. He began to think about his future, about what was more important, to work with tension, chasing money, or to go through life with the confidence that your goal is not only the materialization of what you want, but also harmony with yourself and with what is around you. And then one day, during one of their conversations, Maria said a phrase that stayed with him for a long time. "You will realize, Marcos, that we are not all here to collect riches or victories. We are here to learn to love. Only love is the energy that leads us. And if you learn to love this world, you will feel supported by it. Everything else is a consequence." That night, like many others, was an important step for Marcos to realize that success is not something that comes to you through struggle. It comes when you truly love the world, when you are not afraid to let it go, and when you are not attached to material things. Marcos felt that his life was beginning to change. He began to see the world differently, and this feeling of light and simplicity gradually filled him. He realized that Maria was not just rich in money. She was rich in her attitude to life, her faith, her openness. And this inner richness was what attracted to her not only success, but also people who were genuinely looking for answers. One day, as they sat in the same cafe where they had started their conversations, Maria looked at Marcos with a peculiar expression in her eyes. His face was pensive, and he was listening to her words as always, trying to understand all these concepts she was so wisely expounding. "Marcos," she said quietly, "I have a suggestion. I don't know why I haven't said it before, but perhaps now is the right time." Marcos raised his eyebrows slightly, looking at her in surprise, but he didn't interrupt. He was used to the fact that Maria often made profound, unexpected statements that made him think. "You know," she continued, "I've never been married. I have no children. My life has been devoted to work, to achieving goals, to building a business. I never looked for a life partner, because I was always sure that my goal was not personal happiness, but service to the business. But now I realize that all these years were a preparation. And I see you not only as someone I can work with and talk to, but also as someone who can be my successor, if you want." Marcos froze. He didn't know what to say to such words. His heart began to beat faster, and he felt his thoughts begin to muddle. He had long ago started to feel that there was something special between him and Maria, but this proposal was a shock to him. Are you talking about marriage?" he asked, trying to get his thoughts in order. Maria nodded. Her gaze was serious, but there was also a light in it that made Marcos feel that this decision was made for a reason, but with an understanding of all they had been through together. "Yes, I'm talking about marriage," she replied. "I realize that life could be coming to an end soon. At my age, you start to see the world differently. You realize that you may not have time to make a mark. But I truly believe that you can be the person to continue what I started. I want to help you find not only happiness, but also what has eluded you for so long, financial independence and the opportunity to live the life you dream of." Marcos sat there, not knowing what to say. He felt his world turning upside down. On the one hand, he felt great respect and gratitude to Maria for everything she had done for him. On the other hand, the offer to marry her was unexpected and a little frightening. "Do you believe that I can become such a person?" he asked, slightly surprised by her determination. Maria smiled, her face soft but determined. "I believe in you. You're smart, you're honest, and most importantly, you're not afraid to work. You know what it's like to be at the bottom, and you know what it's like to move forward despite everything. You will be the person to carry on my work, and I'm ready to give you everything I have. But that's only possible through marriage. We can't leave it up in the air. She took his hand, and Marcos felt her confidence transfer to him. This wasn't just a speech about money or business. It was her faith in him, her genuine desire to help him escape the poverty he'd grown up in. "I understand, Maria," he said, feeling something change inside him. I don't know what to say. This is all so sudden. But I feel like I have a chance. You gave me not only knowledge, but also faith in myself." Maria gently squeezed his hand. "It's not just a chance, Marcos. This is a chance that we can create together. I am ready to be your support and you are ready to be mine. And if you agree, if you believe in us, then you and I can do more than we ever could alone." Marcos remained silent, feeling this sincerity, this trust in him on Maria's part penetrate his heart. He knew that this step would change his life, and perhaps he was ready. Not because of wealth, not for position, but because he felt that this would be their business together, a business they could build together. "I agree," he said at last, and his voice sounded confident, despite the suddenness of the situation. "I agree to be with you, Maria. And I will try not to let you down." Maria smiled, and there was a light in her eyes that was both soft and strong. "Then let's begin this new journey." Marcos and Maria's wedding day was a day that many remembered in a bad way. From the morning on, the streets of the city were filled with conversations filled with whispers and taunts. People did not believe in the sincerity of their union, believing that Marcos, in fact, had not married for love, but for profit. He was very distressed and was very vulnerable. The next day, Marcos woke up to a phone notification. It was a text message from his friend. Reluctantly looking at the screen, Marcos read, "How was the first wedding night? Didn't smell like Claflin? Haha." Marcos clenched his jaws. He knew it was just a joke, but it left an unpleasant residue. He was getting tired of these taunts. He wanted everyone to know why he had done this. He wanted to shout about it. He wanted justice to be done. Maria came into his room and noticed his anger. She took his hand and said quietly, "These are just people not of great intelligence. You have embarked on a new path. Beginnings are always difficult. But you can prove to everyone what kind of man you are." She looked at him with such understanding and support that Marcos felt his heart fill with gratitude. Marcos looked at the phone screen again and smiled, discounting the message with a face full of determination. Yes, maybe it was hard today. But tomorrow, in a month, in a year, he would prove to everyone what kind of man he was. And what he was striving for in this life. As the years went by, Marcos continued to work as hard as ever. Despite all the financial stability that Maria brought him, he couldn't give up his goal of becoming a successful man on his own. After graduation, he got a job in a good company where his hard work and skills did not go unnoticed. He gradually climbed the career ladder, getting promotion after promotion, proving to himself and others that his success was the result of personal labor, not just his wife's wealth. Meanwhile, his life with Maria only grew stronger. She always supported him and believed in him, even though her own fortune allowed them to live without worry. But Marcos didn't feel comfortable knowing that his successes had her contribution as well. He wanted his accomplishments to be the result of his efforts alone. Besides, he did not forget about his family members. His parents, despite all their love and care, had endured difficult years. His father, who until a few years ago had been confined to a wheelchair, was now, thanks to the expensive rehabilitation courses Marcos had helped pay for, beginning to regain his strength. The chance to get back on his feet had become a reality. Each improvement, each small victory gave hope and boosted the spirit of the whole family. Alongside his career development, Marcos decided to help his parents financially. He bought them an apartment in the city center, bright, spacious, overlooking the park. It was a gift that meant a lot to him. He wanted them to feel that their sacrifices and efforts invested in his upbringing had not been in vain. Marcos realized that he couldn't give back everything they had done for him, but he wanted to make their lives better. It gave him a sense of satisfaction and harmony, despite all the rumors and doubts that haunted him at the beginning of his journey. He knew he was doing the right thing and that his life was becoming more complete and meaningful with each passing year. 14 years have passed since Marcos and Maria's wedding, and much has changed in those years. The town that had once discussed their union with derision and distrust now respected and admired Marcos. He had become a symbol of honesty and diligence. Everyone knew that his success was the result of labor, not just position or wealth. He actively invested in the development of the city. He built several new schools for children, supported education programs, and opened modern rehabilitation centers where people could regain their health, as his father had once done. The city's economy was also strengthened by his contributions. He created jobs and inspired other entrepreneurs to develop their businesses. The rumors and gossip had long since died down. Now everyone saw him not just as the husband of a rich woman, but as a man with a huge heart and a strong spirit. Maria, who was now 84 years old, felt her strength waning more and more every day. She could no longer go for walks as often or accompany Marcos to events as she used to. But she still had the same confidence in her eyes with which she had once told him, "You can prove to everyone what kind of person you are." She saw that Marcos had not only lived up to her faith, but had exceeded her expectations. Maria was still his main support and inspiration, and Marcos knew that their time together was becoming more and more precious. He was willing to do anything to make sure her final years were filled with care, love, and peace. It was one of those quiet moments when time seemed to slow down. The sunlight washed softly over the room, and Mary, sitting in her favorite chair, hummed one of her songs as she always did when she was happy. Her smile was as kind and bright as it had once been, and Marcos saw in it all the love she had put into his upbringing and life. She asked him to come closer and lay his head on her lap, as he had done before. It was his way of expressing his gratitude, for she was his mother, friend, and mentor. In her eyes he could always see the incredible strength and wisdom she had passed on to him. Maria said, looking at him with a warm smile, "You see, you did it. I knew it. I was able to give you all my knowledge and strengthen your spirit. You have grown into a real man. You have become an example for the people living in this city. There is less crime here. Young people see you as an authority, and more people are starting to learn and develop." Just one act was able to excite the whole city and change everyone around. Isn't that happiness? Marcos, full of gratitude, replied that he was very grateful to her for this chance, for believing in him and for everything she had done. He had never forgotten that she was the one who had helped him become what he had become. Maria smiled quietly, and her face became even more peaceful. She pressed herself against him, and it seemed that in that moment she gave her heart completely to him, knowing that her mission was accomplished. Those were her last words. Maria fell into an eternal sleep, with the same kind smile on her face that had always been her hallmark. It was her true happiness to see Marcos grow up and become a man she was proud of. Marcos felt as if a part of his soul had gone with her. Her warmth, her wisdom, her unfailing support, everything that had been the foundation of his life for all these years now seemed irretrievably lost. Marcos hugged her still body, feeling tears fill his eyes. He had lost not just a person, but his spiritual pillar, the one who had made him who he had become. When the day of the farewell came, the whole town gathered at her grave. People whom Mary had inspired by her example and those she had helped in times of need came to express their gratitude. Even those who had once condemned their union now stood with their heads bowed, realizing what a great person she had been. Marcos, standing at her grave, vowed, "Maria, I promise you that I will adhere to everything you have taught me. I will live by your principles, love people the way you did. You will forever be in my heart." As he looked up to the sky, a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds and a bright rainbow appeared in the sky. Marcos knew this was her last greeting. Her spirit was by his side, and it was as if she was saying that she would continue to protect and guide him even from there, from eternity. Marcos felt an inner strength. Now he knew that her love and faith would accompany him throughout his life, and with that support he would be able to continue his journey.